tonight we're finishing the first series on the Arabic hidden words. And as we saw last week, it seems to be moving from clusters of hidden words on particular topics to, one hidden word on this and one hidden word on that. But these last hidden words, if I were to imagine a message, some special message that Baha'u'llah might be conveying here, I could imagine worse final messages than saying three basic things. I've said everything I wanted to say to you, so guard this well, and live it out in your lives. And that's kind of a summary, I think, of those last three hidden words. We'll start though with guard this well. Baha'u'llah talks about guarding these gems that he's given us. And David had written that beautiful song on this. And maybe let's read just these passages on vigilance and keeping things safe and secure, and then talk about it. But I included quotations on a few different themes which seem to me to be bearing on this topic. One of which is that that precious gem of faith is something which, on the one hand, is something which should be solid as a rock and something which no storm can move. On the other hand, the fragrance of spirituality is described sometimes as something which is very delicate, which is something whose equilibrium can be disturbed by fairly minor seeming things. Baha'u'llah talks about, as we'll see in one of these quotations, about, for example, the veil of covetousness. He says, if that were to descend upon our inner eye, then consider just how much chaos is wrought. And using the analogy of the eyelid, this tiny thin membrane can block out the entire world. Similarly, that thin membrane, that gauzy little thing that we might not think is a big deal, of covetousness can completely block out our perception of spiritual things. And so I hope we can talk a little bit about that, in my mind, dynamic tension between faith which seems so easily disturbed, a state of spirituality which seems so finely balanced that it can be thrown out of whack, by just being in the presence of someone who doesn't share that vibration, versus the notion of faith as something which should be that should be immune to all external forces. So how do we think about are we talking about two completely different things? And why does Baha'u'llah in so many places advise us to guard against being around those who might disrupt that equilibrium, at the same time that he says consort with everybody, go out into the world and spread this message, obviously including those who don't already share those spiritual vibrations that we have. So anyway, let's read through these and then pause. O ye sons of spirit, ye are my treasury, for in you I have treasured the pearls of my mysteries and the gems of my knowledge. Guard them from the strangers amidst my servants, and from the ungodly amongst my people.
O children of understanding, if the eyelid, however delicate, can deprive man's outer eye from beholding the world and all that is therein, consider then what would be wrought if the veil of covetousness were to descend upon his inner eye. Say, O people, the darkness of greed and envy cloudeth the radiance of the soul, even as the clouds obstruct the light of the sun.
Consider the human eye, though it has the faculty of perceiving all created things, with the slightest impediment may so obstruct his vision as to deprive it of the power of discerning any object whatsoever.
treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly.
He should treasure the companionship of them that have renounced the world, and regard avoidance of boastful and worldly people for precious benefit.
O servants, this nether world is the abode of demons. Guard yourselves from approaching them. By demons is meant those wayward souls who, with the burden of their evil deeds, slumber in the chambers of oblivion. Their sleep is preferable to their wakefulness, and their death is better than their life.
Isn't everyone?
Know thou verily, there are many veils in which the truth is enveloped. Gloomy veils, then delicate and transparent veils, then the envelopment of light, the sight of which dazzles the eyes, as doth the sun, which is enveloped only in its own light. And as we look at it, the sight is blinded and eyes are dazzled. I beg of God to remove all the veilings and familiarize the light with all eyes, so that man may not be veiled from witnessing the Sun of Truth.
Do not argue with anyone, and be wary of disputation. Speak out the truth. If your hearer accepteth, the aim is achieved. If he is obdurate, you should leave him to himself, and place your trust in God.
There are persons with whom we associate and converse whose utterances are life-imparting, joy-giving. The withered and faded are refreshed, the joyless become happy. The extinct become enkindled, and the lifeless are quickened with the breaths of the Holy Spirit. The one drowned in the sea of hesitation and doubt is saved by the lifeboat of certainty and assurance. The one attached to this material world becomes severed, and the one steeped in blameworthy deeds is adorned with praiseworthy attributes. On the other hand, there are some persons whose very respiration extinguishes the light of faith, whose conversation weakens firmness and steadfastness in the cause of God, whose company diverts one's attention from the kingdom of Abha.
Question. How should one associate with people of bad character? Abdu'l-Baha replied, this too has two aspects. There are certain evils whose consequences affect the doer only, and do not extend to others. Of course, with discretion and tact, we must try to warn and educate wrongdoers. They are sick, we must bring healing to them. But there are actions which are injurious to others. Association with persons who commit such deeds leads to a deterioration of morals, and therefore to mingle with them is not advisable, except for persons of perfect integrity who can also impart education. They should be exhorted to exert themselves to modify their morals and refine their behavior. The public should be protected from such harmful conduct by the institutions which administer justice. Thus, in the tablets of the Blessed Beauty, although he commands association with people of all religions and races, he also forbids fellowship with the wicked, admonishing us to shun the people of negation and denial.
So very challenging passages here.
Yeah.
So I have a problem with one of them, the obvious one.
Okay.
So if you don't believe properly your death is better than your life, well, that sounds like something I hear out of an Islamic Shiite right now today, which we kind of condemn that, don't we? I thought we sort of condemn that type of thinking, where a person's death is preferable than their life because of their views on what is right and wrong is, we would say, incorrect. Is Islamists in some of these backward countries believe? Does that make sense to anybody? To me? Because Baha'u'llah had to have known there are fanatics who read this literally and believe it and take it literally. And
Those
think if
people's
they've
death
now
is
been
better
given
than-
permission to go out and kill somebody who doesn't think properly. Surely he knows that there are crazies out there like that, right? Who think they're doing God's work.
Well, surely he also knows, though, that like in the context of all of his teachings, no one is going to understand that that's what he meant.
That's what he said.
That's,
I'm
I don't think that's what he's saying here.
It isn't.
not buying the slippery slope.
I'm not buying that. Yeah.
No, I hear a lot about the concept of demons, and so like, you know, I think it plays a lot into the whole role of like if you come from a Catholic or Christian background, you have there's lots of even the Old Testament refers to demons on a regular, and so having that understanding of what it really means, for me personally, what a demon is, it's more the evil deeds, the evil doings of a person who would cause disunity, who would hurt other people, but not necessarily a person. I don't know. There's a lot to be seen in this. I don't think it can be taken literally.
But I'm worried about the people who will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Of course you don't take it literally, but
Of course.
I mean,
Well, to say that his death is better than his life is not the same thing as saying, so you should kill him. I don't see that in this passage at all.
probably nobody in this room thinks that way. But I'm reading all the time about people who think like that. They think it's, you know, the president is evil, let's go shoot him. I hear that.
You can't though, apparently.
I mean, they act on it,
Yeah, but
and they feel justified.
But isn't there something about that, David, that relates to the community that shapes the inner direction of finding spirituality? I mean, if you're in a community that has so emptied the words of God, including the prophet, of its tenderness, its toleration, of its deeper meaning of what jihad means, as opposed to jihad as a political movement on the outside that can have a military feature to it. If spirituality is about not being military fundamentally, then someone who reads this is going to say, well, that's what it would mean for someone who isn't actually a spiritual person.
But what
I
he
agree
tells
with you.
what
It's
he
that person who wasn't a spiritual person who reads it and thinks he is,
what he
and
tells
he acts
us
on it.
what he tells us is that there are these demons, and what he tells us to do in regard to them is to
Avoid them.
avoid them.
He never
Mark
ever
yourself from
says go
approaching
take
them.
action. Against
Your
these
action is
people.
to avoid them.
Yeah.
Don't
The action
associate
is
with them.
avoidance.
He doesn't tell us to go out and kill them. He's telling us guard yourself from approaching them.
What it really comes down to me is this. Why would he use those words? He had to have known that, you know.
One possibility is hyperbole. I mean, I don't think, I think one can find many instances in Baha'u'llah's writings where he says things, he turns the volume to 11 to make a larger point. And to say that someone's death is better than their life, I think is an example of that kind of hyperbole. You know, it's not a sort of covert suggestion about what you ought to do about it. It's just saying that, you know, he's turning the volume to the 11 on the idea that those who live without spirituality are not truly living.
There are many kinds of people whose death is better than their life. The words of wisdom, I set that one to music.
Right. He whose words exceed his
Deeds.
Yeah.
You know, now though verily his death is better than his life. Okay, so everyone who talks more than they do, are you going to make the same argument? Or are you going to say, oh, this is Baha'u'llah using a dramatic metaphor to deliver a point.
And a hidden word that we're looking at is 69. He talks about guard them from the strangers amidst my servants. So who are the strangers? Because in other places, other hidden words, he talks about that you see only friends, and there are no strangers, So who would be the strangers amidst my servants? And that would be the covenant breakers, I would think, is what he's making a reference to.
Oh, wow.
And who are the ungodly amongst my people?
We had a bona fide covenant breaker
Covenant breakers.
walk into the big meeting in Auckland and start shouting about how the House of Justice was doing it wrong. First time I've ever seen anything like it.
Wow.
Crazy.
How, what was doing what wrong?
Yeah, the House of Justice was,
Oh.
all this kind of stuff. It's just crazy.
I guess
I haven't seen anything like it.
what I hear as a balancing, David, is that you're sort of pulling this out, but I mean, if someone, for example, has spent a good part of their life meditating over the first of the hidden words, my first counsel is this, pure, kindly, radiant heart. How could a person who has absorbed that counsel become a killer?
They can't. I'm not worried about them. You guys are missing my point. I'm not worried about those people. It's not who I'm worried about.
Well, maybe the community needs to step up for those people that you are worried about and remind them of the rest of those passages.
But it also sounds like we're supposed to ignore the people that you're worried about.
Yeah.
Well, he did say put them in jail, some of them.
Where?
He did say that.
I'm not sure what you're
He
referring
said
to.
to protect the.
To protect us.
Um,
We just read it.
in the last
Yeah.
one. I can't find it.
That's what
Public
I
should be
want to say.
protected from such harmful conduct
Yeah.
by the institutions which administer justice.
Let's
You
go
can
for
read
jail.
that. You can read that in different ways.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily read that as you should jail people with whom you disagree.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't say disagree. He said evil.
But constantly he says to shun or to ignore, to not pay attention, which is, I mean, in human society, it's not fun to be ignored or to be shunned.
Well, it's also a form of protection for.
Mm-hmm.
So, Abdu'l-Baha's pointing out that Baha'u'llah both commands us to be associating with people of all religions and races, but he doesn't want us to have fellowship with the wicked. And for those we should, and shunning people of negation is a reference to covenant breakers. That's the people of negation, the Naxali.
Who
And
truly wants to cause
Yeah.
disunity versus
Not
somebody
this-
who's
yeah.
like, I'm not really sure, but I'm not really. I think we also have to define like it's someone who's actively going out of their way to cause disunity, to cause a disruption in the fabric of the Baha'i faith or
yeah,
in
that's
any
what
religion.
the covenant breakers are
Yeah.
doing. And he says to shun it. He doesn't go say kill. He says
Yeah.
shun association. Don't associate with them. Don't hang out with. Why would you want to? Why would you want to hang out with wicked people? I mean that.
But I
that
think-
just,
He did say their death is better than their life.
But
Say
defining
that.
wicked,
why
I
would you
think,
want to
is hard
associate
too.
with them?
Defining wicked
He warns
is
us against
hard.
associating with those people. He says, don't approach them. So, so if you sense that, he's trying to be practical here, and protecting the believers who are all loving, and if they go and start associating with wicked people, they're going to take advantage of that loving nature that the Baha'i has. So part of it is, you do have to have some protection, but at the same time, you can't be so afraid that you're not going to associate with. So you don't look at people as strangers. You don't look, first thing I think of is, oh, you're different than me, and I don't trust you. You know, you may be one of these wicked people. You know, he's not telling us to do that.
It's hard to define wicked, though, I think.
Wicked is about choices that people make. It's not about, beings like an angel or a demon or anything like that. There is no such thing, as I understand it, in the Baha'i view of life. There are human beings making choices, and we all need to support each other toward the best choices we can make.
Bad choices.
So, and also, I'm not so sure that death, and it's kind of avoiding your point, because you're saying, how do we deal with people who refuse to actually be spiritual and hear these words? But I don't think death is merely indicative of, the expiration of your body. I think death, from what I see in a lot of these passages, is just the utter loss by choice of vitality as the being God created you to be. When that's what the death is, then they're lacking vitality to be that is a heck of a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think that's really what he's trying to say in terms of the death. It can be easily misunderstood as a physical death, but I really think it's like you're no longer among us. It's like you're a dead person. You're no longer, you just, you don't think of you anymore. You're gone. That's what I'm thinking.
Like you're dead to me.
You're dead to me.
Yeah.
Is really what I think what he's saying.
Yeah.
But and that fits with everything that I'm reading. That concept fits. I just
But we still love them, even though they're dead in that respect. Nobody loses their divine censure, even when they make horrible choices. So we eschew them to the extent that they are compelling us through their own contribution to the life of our community to do these hateful things. But it doesn't mean that at one level we cast them aside, but at another level you can't cast anybody aside.
I'm not. So when people die, it doesn't mean you forget about them, and it doesn't mean you stop loving them because they died. I'm taking a metaphorically. No, of course not. But you're no longer able to do things with them. You don't do things with them anymore. You can remember them. You can still love them.
You're not going to share their poisonous values in order to be with them.
Yeah.
That I get.
Yeah.
I think the point you're making is what makes this such a difficult topic for me. That I believe that what Baha'u'llah is referring to here when he talks about avoiding, shunning these people, all using this very, very strong language, is he's talking about what philosophers and others call bad faith. Saying there's a state of bad faith in which you're not really interested in pursuing the truth. You're interested in trolling someone. You're interested in undermining something for the sake of the joy it brings you. You're interested in whatever. And bad faith is out there. It's a thing.
Like narcissism.
Like malignant narcissism, like all sorts of, there's lots of bad faith, particularly as regards to our relationships with others. Baha'u'llah says when you identify cases of bad faith, the best thing to do is to avoid it. That's what I think he's referring to. But bad faith is a subset of the kinds of negative interactions we can have with people around in the world. We can have negative interactions with people who violently disagree with what we believe is true and right. But that can be a good faith disagreement. When I say violently, I don't mean literally. I mean, it can be a strong good faith disagreement, and you can have a robust and productive argument out of that. And it can be something in which emotions flare and so forth. But I think what Baha'u'llah is referring to here is that kind of bad faith for which there really is no cure except just avoiding those people. But where this becomes such a difficult subject, and I think your question kind of drills down on it very acutely, is who decides what's a bad faith argument and what's a good faith argument? It can be a slippery slope. I mean, people can mistake good faith for bad faith. And that's a very scary thing, because someone who thinks they're arguing in good faith and say, criticizing a community and what a community is doing might be misunderstood by that community as arguing in bad faith simply because they're criticizing.
Yeah.
And if a community is intolerant to critique, then it's very easy to take what is in essence a good faith argument, an argument which is trying to get at the truth, an argument which is trying to improve the state of things, and it can be taken as a bad faith argument, and then it becomes a matter of you're not one of us, we're shunning you, we're casting you out from the congregation. And that's, I think, where there's a real danger, and that happens.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, define wicked. What's considered wicked?
Right.
Because I know people who have been angry with the Baha'i faith.
Mm-hmm.
Are they wicked people? No. But they're angry because they heard one interpretation or one misunderstanding. Or even if it is not a misunderstanding, they're angry about whatever situation it is. But I don't consider them wicked. Would I shun them because we can't agree on this one thing? And they don't all call themselves Baha'is, but they're very adamant about telling other Baha'is about how bad the Baha'i faith is. I get it. But it's still, they're not a wicked person. Like, so I was conflicted by this too, because I was like, how do you define wicked?
Right. It doesn't mean someone who is contradicting you.
Right.
The shining spark of truth comes forth from the clash of differing opinions. So, and we should recognize that and celebrate differing opinions in our own consultative processes, within our own community, and not jump to the conclusion that you're arguing in bad faith, you're among the ungodly, your very breath is poisonous to me, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's not that that's not a thing. I mean, these various quotations are telling us, yes, that is a thing. But it's a dangerous weapon, I think, to use.
As a translator, you understand the translation. So the English word here is death. Mm-hmm. Death is better. That's the English translation. Is that how you understand it it was written in Arabic? Would they use the exact same plain language?
They would. I didn't check the original.
Same plain language?
Yeah, I didn't check the original, but death and life are among those relatively rare instances of words that it's very clear. I mean, there isn't going to be some other metaphor.
There's no poetic ways of death.
No.
There's no poetic ways.
The words themselves, the dictionary definitions are all going to be the same.
Okay.
But I think you just have to read it as...
Maybe he means that it's better if they never become Baha'is.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Because death, spiritual death, and like the Bible's spiritual death and spiritual life that Jesus pronounced on the people who were...
It's different to say somebody in
like
the
the bread
present
bear the
state
dead.
is X versus somebody should never ever be afforded the
Even that's
opportunity to
super harsh.
become a
Yeah.
person who discovers God, since that is kind of the principle of my faith, it seems to me. And I like Christina's point about wickedness. To me, that word is the essence of that faith.
Yeah.
That's what that faith
I hear wicked, I hear eternal damnation, I hear no coming to the light whatsoever. And it's like a very harsh way of thinking it. So for me, it's not very black and white. It's more like that is extreme. This person is murdering Baha'is, for instance. Like that to me would be the definition of wicked. And I can't fathom that in my world because that doesn't exist in my world. But I do meet people who have an opinion that's very against my opinion, but that doesn't make them wicked. And so that was what I was conflicted with when I was reading it.
Yeah, wicked smacks to me a kind of a disposition. It's very hard to pin down how you measure a person's character around a word like that. But maybe it's kind of like the Supreme Court judge, you know it when you see it. I think wicked is a very useful way of characterizing. But also, an eternal doesn't mean long-lasting. Eternal means existing outside the realm of time. So something could be in an eternal state of fury against God. And their time will come when that will end. So it's not like, we should cut them off because they can never change. Because there's somehow duration is going to be attached to that bad faith in a way that is irredeemable. I don't think that's what we're called to be toward anyone. But we can say, not now.
Yeah. I I felt like these passages are maybe not so much talking about maybe on a societal level, but I took them more on a personal level. Like, if I'm finding that being around this person is making it hard for me to maintain my faith and my spirituality, then I should probably not spend time with that person. And that doesn't mean that they're wicked or evil, or that someone else might not be able to have a different kind of relationship with them, but that I'm supposed to treasure these pearls, you know, these gems. I'm supposed to try to just protect myself. And I mean, last week we read many passages about how, you know, if someone is ignorant, then we try to educate them, and, you know, yes, you try all those things, but if that's not working, and I'm finding, like I said, that it's having a negative effect on my spiritual well-being, then I need to take action to protect myself. That was kind of the way I saw these passages.
I was understanding it similarly too, and I was thinking about the one that we are studying, first one, is that I don't want to become a stranger, and I don't want to become ungodly. And the treasures that have been given to us are these gems of revelation, you know, that he's given us, and to guard those and keep those sacred in our hearts, and to keep ourselves from becoming that stranger and becoming ungodly ourselves. That's how do you guard against that? You know, I look to myself first, you know, that I'm going to keep these precious in my life. You know, these words are precious, and they're, you know, and I want to be a treasury of Baha'u'llah. So I want to treasure those gems and honor them and protect them and keep them sacred, and not become that stranger or that ungodly person.
Yeah, I tend to think also the same lines as Kim was saying, that what one needs to do to preserve one's own sense of spirituality may not be the same as what another person needs to do. So a particular kind of personality, for example, might be toxic to one person, but might be kind of refreshing to another person. And so probably the wisest course of action would be not to project some sort of essential attribute onto any person, as this person is ungodly, this person, from this person the breath of whatever wafts, you know, that kind of a thing, but rather put it in terms of one's own, you know, in the context of my own spirituality, where I'm at now, this kind of interaction with this kind of personality may not be in my best interests. Maybe that would be like a wiser course and a safer course of action, because how often does it happen where we have that sensibility of that puts someone in that category of other, that was just a result of a lack of understanding or a lack of love or empathy or something else. You know, something else within us changes, and then suddenly it unlocks a way of understanding the other which wasn't there before. But
something I took away from this question about evil deeds and slumbering in a state of oblivion is that it's better that they continue to sleep in that state of oblivion than to inflict their evil upon others. And what it made me think about is, while there are teachings that every human soul who has an image of God inscribed in them, while that's true, it's not our individual responsibility to be their redeemer. That's God. And so if their infliction of evil is that bad, then it's time for us not to be subject to that.
Yeah. And that's an amazing attribute to have, I think, also something that's really difficult for us to do in our society, which is like to ignore something, to ignore a person because they're causing you physical harm versus being combative and trying to win them over, or trying to like, you know, I think in our society that's not something that we would normally do. And he's not saying kill them. He's saying ignore them. They're like basically like we said before, like they're dead to me. Like I know they no longer exist in my peripheral, which is a different concept from what I hear in other religions. You know, that it's just like this. I don't know. It's just very. It's a kinder way, a more loving way to be rid of that toxicity.
Then the question is, how does one guard? And be that. I'm just in my mind. I was just thinking about the example of Abdu'l-Baha, where there was a person that hated Abdu'l-Baha with a passion, but he was sick.
Right, and he kept covering
And
his
Abdu'l-Baha
face.
kept visiting him. He did it for like, what, 30 years? Something like that.
Very long time.
Before the guy finally just kind of broke down and recognized, you know, the love that Abdu'l-Baha had taken care of him. And then Abdu'l-Baha would be there cleaning and, you know, giving him soup and getting, you know, taking care, you know, cleaning up the place because he couldn't do it for himself. And Abdu'l-Baha was the only one who'd show up and do it. And it finally, the love finally penetrated. But I was thinking, you know, that Abdu'l-Baha was guarded. He could associate with that person, which for most of us normal folks, we say, oh, I don't want to be around that person, just drags me down. He just was hurling invectives at you all the time, and abuse and verbal abuse. And, you know, the only way I can guard myself here is to avoid association altogether. But maybe there's also ways that you have to be self-aware. Can you guard yourself so that you are not drugged down with the stranger or the ungodly? Can you do that? I don't know.
I also think that Abdu'l-Baha in that regard also knew he would win him over one day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it
He
wasn't
saw
like he
through
was
the-
putting himself in harm. You know, I think if Abdu'l-Baha was putting himself in harm, I don't think he would have continued to share that love, because that wouldn't be the example that he would want us to have.
No, because he wouldn't associate with the covenant breaker. But this man was not a covenant breaker.
No, he just kept covering his face every time he kept coming over
He was
and making noises or something like
He
that.
was an enemy of the faith. But that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, another question that comes up for me as I think about this. Jesus, there's a passage in the Gospels where Jesus says, you know, don't, lack of a better phrase, don't oversimplify this. I came with a sword.
Oh yeah.
And I remember thinking about that passage after studying the Baha'i faith and thinking, isn't that a solid principle? That anything that militates in favor of disunity has got to be something not to do. So why would Jesus be that way? What is he seeing there? And then, this is what this reminds me a little bit. And so the notion of unity is much deeper than just companionship or accommodating someone else when they're in a posture of hatred toward God. So that's a theme among the manifestations, at least those two. I mean, I don't know what the rest of you think. Have you ever sort of put together in your mind why a manifestation, Jesus of Nazareth, would make such a harsh statement? I come to bring the sword. You know, the father will be separated from his son, the mother from her daughter-in-law, and all of this stuff. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, is I think how some of the scholars interpret that passage. But it's not about unity. Except it has to be about unity at some deeper level, but some places we don't understand.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to read this philosopher, Peterson, which forced me to go back to the book of Genesis here this week. reading the book of Genesis again, and it was pretty clear. If you read the book of Genesis in its literal format, King James Version in its literal format, and you're familiar with the book of Genesis. If you're evil, God, not somebody else, but God himself, he destroyed you, he killed you. Wiped out entire cities. Men, women, and the children along with them. Killed them all. Killed them all. With fire and brimstone, that didn't work, he drowned them all in the flood because they were evil. In this case, with literal, if you want to read it literally. God doesn't tolerate people who don't believe properly. That's literally. Now, I don't think that's the spiritual message. I only bring this up because I know you're saying, well, this couldn't be literal, but this is common language in religion, is to say things like this. What are they really saying? I don't think that God intends for us to believe that that's what we should be doing. This is what I do as God, so I want you to do the same thing. I don't think that's what he wants us to do. But yet we say that it's not, right? Christ says, come around, I've got a sword here. Sword's not used for picking your teeth. It's meant to kill.
In the Kitab-i Gan, Baha'u'llah refers to the reason for the obscurity of the verses, how they're so difficult to understand. And Baha'u'llah says this is to distinguish roses from thorns, belief from denial. So one function of his words is to perform a kind of a sorting process.
Sheep from the goat.
The sheep from the goats. And this is a very obscure reference, but Baha'u'llah refers to this statement by Jesus about buying, whoever hath the sword, let him find a sword. Baha'u'llah quotes this in one of his untranslated tablets where he talks about alchemy and the process of alchemy. And as the medievals understood the process of alchemy, it was finding some substance, separating that substance, purifying the different parts, and then reuniting it. And Abdu'l-Baha describes the alchemical process as partly as a metaphor of the spiritual process. And the spiritual process involves purifying in fire until sort of a higher degree of harmony is attained. And so it's an interesting kind of side point, but Baha'u'llah thought of, and traditionally Jesus is also regarded as an alchemist in that kind of spiritual sense. But one of the first and great sort of stage in the stages of the great work of the transmutation of souls is the state of separation.
When Jesus said that, did he have an actual sword?
No, he was referring to the fact that he needed to be taken seriously. It wasn't a matter of him coming with these notions of loving mankind and loving and being kind. He wanted them to understand he came with the sword. He came to destroy the man-made notions and the man-made rules. That was his the whole part of his prophecy. His mission was to destroy. And so that was the main cause of the sword, or the concept of the sword.
The truth is.
And we talked about the separation of fathers and the sons. That separating yourself from the past.
Well, because the man kept coming up with excuses. The man came to him and said, I have to bury my father, I have to do all these things. And he's all like, let that go. If you're going to do it, do it. That was the concept. Like, follow with your heart or don't follow at all.
One of the characteristics in a particularly cheap kind of Christianity, in my view, is Jesus is always nice.
Yeah. Which is why he had to say what he had to say. You believe it or you don't believe it. I've come here to do more than just tell you words.
This is more serious, in my opinion, nice person to everyone.
The joke about the Zen hot dog stand, make me one with everything. Is that kind of, that's the kind of cheap version of, oneness is this kind of loosey-goosey, everything is all one, which is true, but to get to that requires the separation before the unification.
Yeah.
In a way, we're talking about the monomyth that Joseph Campbell talked about. We're talking about the story behind all stories, which is you proceed from the one, the village in the case of the monomyth, and you depart into the underworld, and there you have your transformative experience, and you return back to the village in the end. That's the story of the cosmos. It proceeds from the one and returns to the one, from the one to the many to the one, and we are in that stage of the many, and in that stage of the many, there's separation between this and that, and before it can return to the one, it needs to be purified. So in a way, there's no surprise in any of this. It's all kind of cosmically different ways of describing that one cosmic process of the circle of existence. Shall we touch upon the second one? And I put a question mark at this because I wasn't sure. I wanted to toss this out to you all. But I noticed completion at the end of both the Persian and the Arabic hidden words. Baha'u'llah seems to say, here it is. I've completed it. Basically, I've said all I have to say.
Everything you need to know.
Tell you everything you need to know.
And this is before he even declared his mission.
And this is one of his earliest tablets, before he declares his mission, before he reveals the Kitab-i-Gan, before everything else, he's already said everything he has to say. So we've already read the first of this, which is for Arabic hidden word number 70. And at the end of the Persian hidden words, he also says something similar. He says, the mystic and wondrous bride, hidden ere this beneath the veiling of utterance, hath now, by the grace of God and his divine favor, been made manifest even as the resplendent light shed by the beauty of the beloved. I bear witness, O friends, that the favor is complete, the argument fulfilled, the proof manifest, and the evidence established. Let it now be seen what your endeavors in the path of detachment will reveal. In this wise hath the divine favor been fully vouchsafed unto you and unto them that are in heaven and on earth. So Baha'u'llah, at the start, of course, of the Arabic hidden word, says, this is that which hath been revealed unto the prophets of old, clothed in the garment of brevity as a token of grace unto the righteous. So he starts off saying this is a kind of summary or distillation of what's been said before. So one could read this as, okay, this is the end of the distillation. But at the same time, Baha'u'llah, in his Book of Laws, in his Kitab-i-Aqdah, says, this is the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Let him who seeketh attain it. So there's one aspect of Baha'u'llah's own message in which he isn't telling us anything new. And he says that pretty explicitly. He says, what I'm telling you has been told before. I'm telling it anew because it needs to be told anew. You still need to hear the same thing, because you've forgotten it or because of whatever reason. But here it is again. And then there's this other aspect of Baha'u'llah's revelation, which is a very specific kind of message suited to a very specific time and place. Particularly, I think I go immediately to the idea of houses of justice, the idea of a consultative principle, a democratic principle underlining human governance, which Baha'u'llah is calling the whole world to, and that's something new. I mean, we don't see that in any specific sacred text in the past, where you have a sort of a direct suggestion of how we ought to govern ourselves, and giving it a kind of divine mandate. Not just do your best and but rather this is a God-ordained solution to the problem of disunity in the world. So I think of things like that as in the category of, okay, this hasn't been said before.
But isn't that just the exigencies of the age in which we live?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That these are the...
This is the essence.
These are the spiritual teachings that have been expressed forever.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to that kind of thing, then that's what we need now for this age.
That's what I think about.
Yeah, well, there's the individual development of the soul. What does the soul need to ascend to the next world? What do you need in the next world? He's given us everything here in the hidden words as your individual salvation. But then there's a societal salvation. And that's where the institutions come into play, and the kingdom of God that He's given us. And that's for creating an environment that will be conducive to helping all those individual souls and beings. So that we have education for everybody, that we have unity, and we eliminate prejudice, and we do all these things that will make it a society, an environment that will be much easier to raise those children and to be soulful beings, because they're supported by the whole society around them. As, so there's universal salvation and there's individual. And an individual, we're all here because it's based on the same spiritual principles of all religions.
If ye perceive it, perceive nothing.
Oh, we didn't actually read the Arabic Hidden Words 70, did we?
No.
Okay, could someone read that? So,
Which one is that?
it's the first question under
the first
completion.
one under completion.
Yeah.
O son of him that stood by his own entity in the kingdom of his self, know thou that I have wafted unto thee all the fragrances of holiness, have fully revealed to thee my word, have perfected through thee my bounty, have desired for thee that which I have desired for myself. Be then content with my pleasure and thankful unto me.
So, consecration?
Yeah.
So this is his last word in the Hidden Words, in the Arabic Hidden Words. And I just have a few, easily there could have been pages of quotations on this topic, but I just have a few things to conclude with. So let's read them first and then talk about them.
I'd like to read.
Thank you.
O Son of Man, write all that we have revealed unto thee with the ink of light on the tablet of thy spirit. Should this not be in thy power, then make thine ink of the essence of thy heart. If this thou canst not do, then write with that crimson ink that hath been shed in my path. Sweeter indeed is this to me than all else, that its light may endure forever.
It behooveth thee to consecrate thyself to the will of God. Whatsoever hath been revealed in his tablets is but a reflection of his will. So complete must be thy consecration that every trace of worldly desire will be washed from thine heart. This is the meaning of true unity.
Within the very breath of such souls as the pure and sanctified, far-reaching potentialities are hidden. So great are these potentialities that they exercise their influence upon all created things.
It behooves each one of you to manifest the attributes of God and to exemplify by your deeds and words a sign of his righteousness, his power and glory. The very members of your body will bear witness to the loftiness of your purpose, the integrity of your life, the reality of your faith, and the exalted character of your devotion. Such must be the purity of your character and the degree of your renunciation, that the people of the earth may through you recognize and be drawn closer to the Heavenly Father, who is the source of purity and grace. For none has seen the Father who is in heaven. You who are his spiritual children must by your deeds exemplify his virtues and witness to his glory. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt hath lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? Such must be the degree of your detachment, that into whatever cities you enter to proclaim and teach the cause of God, you should in no wise expect either meat or reward from its people. Nay, when you depart out of the city, you should shake the dust off your feet, as you have entered it pure and undefiled. So must you depart from that city.
It's so gospel-like.
Yeah.
Bob is very good.
Yeah. The Bab says in this address that he says he's paraphrasing the words of Jesus. He says, in words such as these, Jesus bade his disciples to go out into the world and preach. And then he gives very similar words of just consecrate yourselves to this cause and go forth. The word consecration is not in the hidden word itself. That was my own interpretation of the connection.
This has always been the hidden word that is the most mysterious to me.
Which one?
It's Linda. Write all that we have revealed unto thee with the ink of light upon the tablet of thy spirit.
What does that mean? To me, it means consecration, but I don't know what else.
That I've always thought of it as being different levels. The ink, and what is ink? Ink is, how you communicate or how you put something to paper. You have to translate what has been said. He used ink to write these hidden words from what his spirit, his communion with the spirit is, and then he uses ink to communicate. And so when I saw the ink of light, he says, if you can't do this, and I was thinking about it in terms of the spirit. You're taking this to in your heart, and there's a level of ink of the spirit. What is the ink of light? The spirit. I'm thinking of that as being like a very intellectual, or it's in the realm of the spirit, and then it gets down to the ink that's shed on the path. I'm thinking that's really your deeds. It's what the physical plane that you are making meaning by what you're actualizing on a physical plane. And the last sentence I thought about, sweeter indeed is this. And when I first read it, I thought he's extolling martyrdom over anything else. Then I thought, no, this is not referring to that. This is referring to that it's light may endure forever. That is what's sweeter to him. That the light of this revelation is going to endure forever. And that is what is, so to make it eternal is what is sweeter. So he's not saying, oh, martyrdom is the superior way, it's the best way. It's just that we all have different ways of relating to the revelation. Some of us, it's emotional. Your faith is based on an emotion. Some it's in this realm of
Promptings of the heart.
And some it's, I'm out there and I'm on the path of martyrdom. Where is your faith base? Where do you get your, and Baha'u'llah, it's none of that. Whichever path you use to make that you use as your ink doesn't matter. What's really important is that it's enduring forever.
It's also he's saying, consecrate yourself, spirit, heart, and body.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm ordering them as spirit first and then heart. And if you can't do the first two, then body. Yeah. But then to sort of make sure that there isn't we aren't left with some false hierarchy.
Yeah.
He then says about the body, sweeter indeed is this to me. So it leaves us with a kind of ambiguity about hierarchy, which is where it ought to be, right? Because these are all equivalent ways of consecrating oneself.
I was thinking like the first two were even the hardest. Like when I read it, I was sort of like, if you can do it in the tablet of the spirit, awesome, that's great. In the heart, okay, awesome. And if you can't do it, okay, fine.
Be a martyr.
Just I guess you'll have to do this, and that's about what I can expect. I really felt like. I feel like the first two were the ones that were the more difficult. If this thou canst not do, then write that crimson ink.
But then he says, sweeter indeed is this.
But what really matters?
I think all of it is sweet.
All great.
I think Roger's point to me also makes a lot of sense. It's like all of it is what I'm talking about. Because to be a martyr, you have to really also do the other two. I mean, it's almost impossible. Well, I don't know about that. There's some people that consider themselves martyrs. I don't know if they would be martyrs.
Well, one thing that I wonder about in that last part of it is this crimson ink. I mean, it seems to me that he's actually kind of giving us a much deeper sense of what it means to be a martyr. A martyr isn't just to have bloodshed, have your body, cut by the sword of a non-believer or something like that. It's that you are fusing death and life.
Yeah.
If you do this in my path, then the life that I have given you and empowered you to do this with is transforming your death into something life-giving, which is the sweetest of all. And it's not that you glory in like some kind of masochism to die in order to show what a great follower you are. It's that your heart is so completely focused on abandoning your physical life, your physical choices even. It doesn't have to be the sacrifice of your body's blood, but it's what you do. What you do is utterly transforming of your spirit, and that's the sweetest of all. And its light endures forever because you have gone past the death of this life into fusing the life and death of your own being in complete submission to God.
As I say, there's many meanings.
Yeah.
And I understand that in the Persian culture that there are certain symbolic meanings of color.
Yeah.
So crimson doesn't necessarily refer to blood, does it? It refers to something in the Persian culture when you use the word crimson to describe
True. In this context, probably it refers to blood. In other contexts,
in other contexts.
it refers to other things.
Because he talks about the crimson book, and there's crimson's used for different.
It's used a lot, yeah.
Crimson Ark?
The Crimson Ark.
Crimson Ark, yeah, I see
Yeah.
that.
The Crimson Elixir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mystical one. Yeah.
So there's some mystical meaning in Persian culture to these colors, and I know crimson is one of them. But I can't remember from the class I took. Oh, exactly what would that mean? And I was hoping that maybe you knew. No, you don't remember?
The stage. Nader Sadie talks about it. There's 4 different colors.
Yeah.
And
the Bab uses that.
Nader Sadie quotes and kind of pulls out all the different groups of 4 in the writings of the Bab. And yeah, that's a very abstruse subject that we could get into another evening.